of healthcare and 300 billion from SNAP, while it simultaneously providing $1.1 trillion in tax cuts. And as I'm fond of saying, it's easy to sort of shorthand these quantities of money by saying a million here or a billion there or $1 trillion now. A better way to look at it, in my opinion, is to look at $1 million within the context of your own finances. And if you were to try to discover what your net worth is, you would take all of your liabilities, all of your bills, all of your the things that you owe or have to pay each month, and subtract that from all of your assets, the things that have value in the marketplace if you were to try to sell it. And the difference between your liabilities and your assets is what's called your net worth. And most people in the United States do not have a net worth more than $1 million. Maybe it's 93%, 94% of the American people do not have a net worth of $1 million or more. Why am I focused on $1 million? Because $1 billion is 1,000 million. So if you're a billionaire and you spend $1 million on a house, you still have $999 million left. Or if you spend it on a $5 million yacht and a $10 million house, you'd still have $985 million. What then is $1 trillion? $1 trillion is 1,000 billion dollars. So the tax cuts that the wealthy will receive from this bill amounts to 1 trillion 100 billion dollars. Were this bill to be enacted, it makes accommodations for a child tax credit. But under the plan, the single parent with 2 children who earns $16,000 in earnings, that is a typical in-home support service worker, $16,000 in annual earnings. They get a $2,025 credit for their children. There's no increase. For a married couple with 2 children, it's earning $400,000. They get a $5,000 tax credit, a $1,000 increase over the current amount. I said earlier, we're talking about food out of the mouths of babes. The SNAP cost shift to states could lead to very large benefit cuts. And this chart says that for every $1 billion in state funding, there will be from the federal government, there will be a $100 million match that the state is required. And so this shows you, because states have different sort of levels of matching funds, this tells you gives you an example of the impact that it may have. So there are millions of people who are at risk of losing food, including folks who are 55 to 64 and children as well, all of which is related to a new work requirement that is being imposed. The estimates, of course, are not fully accurate, but it just tells you generally who is at risk. So, how do the benefits shake out? People making over $1 million would receive roughly $90,000 in tax benefit in the year 2027. The top 1% gets about 65,000. The range, the 90 to 99, of course, as you see, gets about 11,000. And in the fourth 20%, they would get approximately $2,700. So this is the first quarter. This is, I'm sorry, that's the first 20%. That's the second 20%, third, fourth, and the final. Now, there's been a discussion about tariffs and the role that tariffs are playing. We saw that Walmart, uh, uh, on the day that the House passed this bill, indicated that they were going to go up on prices. I think most people know that Walmart is one of the several big box sort of stores that accommodates working class budgets, if not tastes, certainly budgets. With the tariffs, this is the impact that the budget will have on folks because tariffs are going to raise prices on everyone. Tariffs are a general sales tax paid for by importers who generally pass those costs along to consumers. So if you adjust for the costs that will be passed along to us by Trump's tariff tax, this is the impact it has on folks and their prospective tax cut from the bill. And that's just on the income side. We're not talking about the service cuts that will be occurring because of everything that is happening. Folks might recall that over the weekend, there were these significant tornadoes, and the Trump administration rushed to say, oh, well, the tornado in this particular area wasn't impacted by the cuts that have already been made to the National Weather Service because we surged resources, that is, human beings, personnel, into that area when it looked like things were going to go bad. Really? You believe that? Do people believe that all of a sudden, after all of this time, that Newark, New Jersey's airport all of a sudden is having difficulty guiding planes into the airport? My point is that Trump is succeeding. He's making all of us question what we see and what we think we know. And he's making it impossible for anyone to believe what the government is saying. And that's the whole point. Because if there is no truth anymore, then people can do and say anything they want. Like a 13-year-old 747 used jumbo jet is a gift that Trump intends to fly around as Air Force One for the remainder of his presidency, and then have access to it when he leaves, if he leaves. So, what impact will the bill have on deficits since Republicans are always talking about budget deficits? Well, under current law in the Navy blue, as a percentage of gross um, uh, domestic uh, product, the deficit is 5.2%. Under the House reconciliation bill, the deficit is projected to grow to 7% of GDP. And assuming a 2.6 average annual rate of growth in the economy from now through 2034, the deficit will be in that orange line. Trump's own Treasury Secretary identified a 3% of GDP target. You can see that this budget reconciliation bill, either way, the 2.6 growth assumption or just the straight House reconciliation as it is currently anticipated, without that great growth assumption, is well over the 3% GDP target. And it only gets larger when you move out to 2034. So then you have to ask yourself a question. If this amount, remember, this amount is deficit spending and is being added to the national debt, how much in the interest on that national debt do taxpayers have to pick up? And under the tax cuts that are being proposed, who do you think will bear the biggest burden, either in higher taxes or in fewer services, because of reductions that will be made in federal spending? Now, I haven't even gotten to issues about where the spending has been increased in this bill, but you should know that the Trump administration proposes to spend over $1 trillion on our military under this budget. $1 trillion on military expenditures at a time where he's promising to make peace all around the world, whether it's in Gaza or Ukraine or Greenland or Panama or Canada, places that he wants to annex. So this is a statement that was provided by the Committee for a Responsible Federal Budget, I believe, and I'll get the source for you all in a minute. I'm going to put the link in the chat so you can look at this stuff yourself. This is what they have to say about Trump's proposals, their prospective impact on Social Security. He eliminates the taxation on Social Security benefits, ends taxes on tips, overtime, imposes tariffs, and expands deportation, the Social Security cash deficit will widen. Remember, Social Security taxes are payroll taxes. And if the payroll taxes don't keep up with, uh, or if they are reduced, then it will impact the solvency on Social Security. The other point is that undocumented workers pay into the Social Security, they get counterfeit Social Security numbers, they pay into the system, but will never be able to draw down on it. So they are, in fact, subsidizing Social Security to the extent that they pay into the system and never receive any benefits from it. So this is another sort of conversation about the impact of the deficit. And then I'm sorry, the order of these is wrong. This is another conversation about the solvency of Social Security and what will happen as a result of the uh, proposed actions. And so one might look at the attack on Social Security that Musk initiated when he called it a Ponzi scheme and the efforts to reduce services as part of the groundbreaking effort to eventually erode support for what is the most successful anti-poverty program the government has ever initiated, so that it loses public support. And when issues of solvency or insolvency are raised over the next decade, the response will be, well, let's privatize it. Let's let the wonders of the capitalist marketplace resolve this issue. So that's some of the key point. So as I indicated, that was uh, 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 this was all about the money. Um, and Courtney, I'm having oh, there it is. Sorry. So that's the presentation that I wanted to provide today to provide some perspective on what is likely to happen over the next 72 to 96 hours. Remember, Speaker Johnson wants to try to get this bill passed by the House by Memorial Day, which is this Monday. The Rules Committee is going to meet tonight at 1 a.m., 10 o'clock Pacific time, to decide on what the rule is going to be for the debate on this question. How long it's going to last, from what speakers we will hear, and what amendments, if any, will be permitted. And then there will be probably a round of procedural votes that are sort of test votes. Typically, if a procedural vote wins, gets the majority needed, then the bill itself is going to pass. Because politicians typically do not want to vote on the bill in a negative way if they can avoid it. So the way to stop the bill is by voting to limit the procedure that gets the ultimate action to the House floor for a complete vote. So with that note, I will take any questions that folks have on the issues that have been raised. If no questions, then certainly comments.
Good evening. Have two questions. How are you, everybody, today? When you showed us the chart with the GDP that says 3%, and the 3% was like the halfway mark with every column above that, that
Yeah.
means that that's what's going to be, the deficit is going to be, although they're talking about taking away all this money to reduce spending some kind of way, we're going to still be spending that plus one other stuff.
All of that.
Is that what that is saying to us?
Program budget.
What it's saying is that 3% was the target that the Treasury Secretary Bissett wanted and wants the Trump administration to eventually land on, that it would be 3% of GDP. The three columns that I showed, one was under the current law without any changes, what the percentage of national debt is of GDP. I think it was about 6.3% or something like that. The, the middle chart was the uh, projected percentage of GDP that was the national debt. It was about 7%. Based on the bill without making the assumption that the economy is going to grow at the rate of 2.6%, which is what that third column represented. Does that make
Wow.
Joanne?
Yeah,
So,
that makes,
so we're currently nowhere even close to 3%. We're a little over 6% of GDP goes to national debt.
Like that. You may even want to get deeper and include things like.
okay. And the other one, when you were talking about procedures and them having that meeting this evening, I remember when they did the that stopgap provision. And hold on one second, let me turn this down. And they were saying that there was more that the Democrats could have done to push back against that. What was it, a resolution bill or whatever it was? So what they're going to do is what they're doing with at 1 o'clock in this morning is to eliminate all possibilities for them to be able to interfere because they're going to dictate how this process is going, right?
There will be other opportunities. If you recall from the presentation that we got from Sidney Kamlager's office a couple of weeks ago, reconciliation is the means by which the House and Senate can make uh, amendments, uh, changes to the tax code that will that only require on the Senate side a 51 vote majority. Okay. So this is a constitutional maneuver to um, provide tax cuts to the US population. And by doing so, they have to provide instructions to the appropriators about how to cover the costs of the tax cuts. And so when I said that there were $800 million or $800 billion on the table for Medicaid and $300 billion in cuts for SNAP. Those are the instructions to the appropriators and the other committees that that's where they have to land in order to make good on the tax cuts, also known as tax expenditures, except you're not expending money on services, you're expending money on through reduced taxes, right? And so that's what is happening. What you were referring to when the Democrats um, rolled over, Schumer rolled over, was the continuing resolution that was designed to keep the government funded for this year. Because in the last year, Congress couldn't agree on a budget bill that was the way that the normal process by which the government is funded. Have I confused you more, or is that clear?
That makes perfect sense. Thank you. Yeah.
Okay.
Because no, it just goes back to the next one. And when you talk about the Social Security, I would just want to make sure, because if you're reducing the number of people that's employed, it's going to reduce the number of taxes. So therefore, by the time they get to that point where they say that Social Security is insolvent, because you pulled out all the immigrants too that was contributing, although they don't reap any benefits. You're setting up the stage to be able to say, let's prioritize. Okay.
Correct. So Social Security could be made solvent relatively easily. There is a cap on the amount of income that one can that one earns, and it has to pay taxes on. It's like $180,000 or $190,000 right now. So if you earn $250,000 a year, by October of your calendar of your let's say your monthly salary, you no longer pay Social Security tax. So for the months of typically, November, October, November, December, there are no Social Security taxes that are paid because you reached your 180,000 or whatever it is cap on earnings that are subject to Social Security. So one of the ways to resolve that issue is to increase the cap so that people who earn upwards of $500, $600, $700,000 a year continue to pay Social Security tax on that income. So you will hear people say that there are ways to solve the insolvency of Social Security that do not require benefit cuts. And that is to tax all income earners for Social Security, which is something that doesn't happen right now. In an earlier conversation, folks need to be mindful. Earlier conversation I had with people today, it's important for us to be mindful that while we celebrate Social Security and all that it means to those of us who receive it and those of us who aspire to receive it, if you are Black, when the Social Security Act was first signed into law 90 years ago this August, agricultural workers and domestic workers were exempt. Now, who do you think in 1932 or 1935 were the agricultural workers and domestic service workers. By domestics, I'm not talking about just the housekeepers. I'm talking about the chauffeurs. I'm talking about the butlers. I'm talking about all categories of domestic help. None of them was covered. And we all know who they were. So it wasn't until later, I think it was after World War II in the early 1950s, that Social Security was expanded to cover domestic workers and some categories of agricultural workers. So again, it's the system using the disparate impact and disparate opportunity that racial discrimination provides to create a color-coded workforce that receives privileged access to the benefits of citizenship, with Black people providing the shock absorber for the worst impacts associated with the vagaries of our economic system. So when white people experience recession, we experience a deepening depression. And so our efforts at promoting diversity, equity, and inclusion, DEI, were designed to address that unjust inequity that was the result of legal discrimination that resulted in a racial wealth gap that Trump is attempting to exacerbate. Whether he's doing it consciously or not, that's the role public policy can play. So the question on the table is, for us to consider a little later, what are we going to do about it? Are there any other questions?
Yes, Mr. Harris, this is Annette.
Yes,
Thank you
ma'am.
so much. I saw you earlier today, and you are very thorough with your information. I really appreciate it. So you made a statement saying what we're going to do about it. What are we going to do about it? Are we going to go into the community and start talking to families and talking to individuals to let them know what's going on? Do we have a plan? What are we going to do? Because if we don't reach the masses in our communities, we're going to have serious issues, especially for those that's going to be cut off.
Anybody want to take a stab at answering that question? Pastor Eddie? Bishop Smith?
Well, Vince, I do have a question. So today I saw a clip of Maxine Waters, who I guess she had ended a finance committee meeting because she said it has to be convened by unanimous consent. I'm wondering if we could like for those house meetings that are having 1 p.m., 1 a.m. tonight, are there numbers we should be calling? Should we be sending emails to certain representatives who are going to be in that meeting just to let them know we're paying attention? Is there a certain amount of quorum they got to have that we should like be checking in on? And then also getting it through the House is one part, but on the Senate side, do we think it will pass, or are there some Republicans that are waffling? I know like Josh Hawley is one of the ones who doesn't want to vote on the budget. So are there other senators we should be reaching out to try to encourage them to break rank with
Right.
MAGA?
Well, thank you. That's a really good question, and it kind of gets to uh, some of the answers that um, uh, potential responses to Sister Dias's question. It seems to me that there are a couple of things. First, if you um, abide by the adage that all politics is local, then the very first thing that we need to do is reach out to our own congressional delegation. So in the South Los Angeles area, there are basically three congressional districts. Maxine Waters covers a portion of the south west of the South Side of LA. Uh, Sidney Comlager Dove covers the north and central portions of the South LA district. And Nanette Barragan represents the central and eastern portions of South Los Angeles. And so those are the three congressional representatives. And I believe that Courtney can put into the chat the link to where you can find your uh, elected representative that is hosted by the Los Angeles County Registrar Recorder County Clerk. And I would encourage each of you to copy that link into your own document or place, phone, computer, bookmark it so that you can use it to identify who your elected officials are among those three congresspeople, and for other jurisdictions of government as well, because that link is not limited to just members of Congress. You can find out who your assemblyman is, or assembly person is, who your state senator is, etc. The other two folks that need to be contacted because they are part of the congressional delegation are our own U.S. senators, Padilla and Schiff. Now, one of the Dusky, who was on our call a couple of weeks ago, you may recall, has been very active in promoting folks contacting their legislators. And she discovered in reaching out to Adam Schiff's office that he doesn't even have an office in South Los in not South Los in any Los Angeles. Period. So our US senator who represents California doesn't have a district office anywhere in Los Angeles, the largest county in the state that makes up a quarter of the state's population. How's that for accountability? At the very time that the state is under one of the most intense attacks we've experienced. Yeah, he lives in Burbank. That's where Adam Schiff used to represent in as a member of Congress. But you try to find his US Senate office on his website. Dusky was trying because she was trying to pay his office a visit on the Social Security thing. So she's irate. No excuse. So when we communicate our position about the budget or about Social Security or whatever the issue is that we have, with him in particular, we say, we don't like the idea that you don't have an office that we can access so that we can talk to people on your staff. So we can send a written communication to our own personal elected officials. We can, there is a number, and I will try to locate it, or maybe Courtney can try to find it. It's a switchboard at the U.S. House of Representatives that will direct your calls to members of Congress that you so desire. I believe the Senate has the same situation. And in the Senate, um, if you were going to call anyone, it would be the majority leader. Um, who is that? Is that trying to remember who that is? Is that Thune? Um, it used to be McConnell, and I can see his face, but I'm blanking on his name. So somebody do a quick Google search and look it up. But we can call his office and say we object. Now, you can anticipate that the U.S. senators who will have the most trepidation about going forward with this bill are those who are in marginal states, states that they have won by very, very narrow majorities, the battleground states. So that if there's a Republican who represents the state of Wisconsin, and there is, he may be a little more subject to pressure. If there are Republicans in states that can be flipped potentially, like North Carolina or Iowa or Nebraska, then those are folks who might be feeling a little vulnerable and subject to pressure. The state of Maine is another state that where they confront where Susan Collins confronts challenges. So these are just take a look at the map and recall what we know about politics just from looking at the news. The states that are battleground states are the ones that are subject to pressure. The state of Ohio is subject to pressure. The other thing is, when I get an opportunity, I'll put into the chat the link to the Center for Budget and Policy Priorities, from which a number of those graphs came. And they actually have a link, I think it's by the numbers, that looks at each state and it shares how many um, Medicaid recipients there are, how many SNAP recipients that there are, the impact that budget proposals may have on specific programs. They even have a spreadsheet by congressional district. So one can peruse that and get the information that they need. The third thing I'll just say, Eddie, I know this is a long answer to your question, but I want to be as thorough as possible. In addition to contacting your local representatives and folks from outside your district in DC, in the House and the Senate, everyone needs to find their something to do. And it will be based in part on the amount of time that you have to devote to this effort to organize. It will be based on what role you play in your family or among your networks of associates, acquaintances, coworkers, etc. The most important thing that we can do is to provide them with accurate information, to educate them about the process, and to give them an opportunity to engage, whether it's as simple as writing a letter or making a telephone call, or more aggressively, to get out in the streets and protest or organize a delegation of constituents to attend a meeting of an elected official to say, we've had it. Enough is enough. You either get with the program or move aside because this is real. You don't have to limit yourself to the stuff that we've talked about on the budget related stuff. Does anybody know what Adam Schiff's position is on diversity, equity, and inclusion? Does anyone know how he's going to vote on the crypto bill or how he voted on the crypto bill that passed the Senate? He voted in favor of it, which basically gives Trump carte blanche to pursue another one of his corrupt schemes, his own brand of cryptocurrency. Schiff voted for that. So we just need to, there's a lot that he's throwing at us. So we can choose, we can choose what to swing at. And at this point, there's so much, the Empowerment Congress isn't going to dictate to people what to shoot at or what to swing at. We're just letting you know what we're focused on. And we're focused on Social Security, healthcare, education, the impact the Trump administration is having on reconstruction of Los Angeles as a result of the wildfires, and the attempts by the Trump administration to pull local law enforcement into the effort to deport people. They want to deport people, fine, do it on the federal dime. Don't take resources from our communities, which in many respects are on the one hand over-policed and on the other hand underserved, in order to do it. So okay, I'm off my soapbox. Sister Net, was that okay? Did I do all right?
You did wonderful. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
Good. Any other questions or comments? Pastor Eddie, did I do all right?
Yep, yes, my question.
All right. Anyone else? Is Bishop Smith still on the line? No. Okay. Then you should know that I attended a very uh, significant meeting. There were a number of faith leaders on a Zoom earlier convened by Bishop Smith and Reverend Norman Johnson from First New Christian. And um, they, uh, the folks on the call were interested in organizing a um, demonstration at the Social Security office on Crenshaw It has been scheduled for 10 o'clock a week from this Thursday. And the intention is to, for an hour or so, let folks who are driving down Crenshaw Boulevard know that we support uh, the Social Security, that we support Medicare without any cuts, and that we support Medicaid. Now, some might say, well, it may be too late to be supporting Medicaid. Well, no, because Medicaid is a program that is funded in part by the federal government. The rest of the funding is um, uh, comes from the state. So we can anticipate that we're going to have a similar battle within the state of California as the federal cuts begin to trickle down. And we're going to need to be to put our advocacy hats on to figure out what we can do to minimize the impact on African Americans and hopefully make sure that folks are recording the impact based on race that these cuts are going to have. Joanne?
You mentioned the state budget. We're doing advocacy now because the governor just cut $15 million out of the state budget, or he's proposed to. And it's the only monies that's going to African American women for mental health. And it just cut the budget for the California Black Women's Health Project, I know for sure. But then looking down the line, I hear you very well. And I hear that okay, it's a fantasy and it's a projection, but California pays the most into the US government coffers. What would it look like for us to begin to withhold the things that we need?
That's a very, very good question. Um, I think one of the challenges that we face is the enforcement power the federal government has of those against those who don't pay their taxes in a timely way. And so folks who decide that they don't want to pay their taxes to protest run the risk of the penalties associated with uh, non-payment of taxes, which can be pretty hefty. So um, I think one of the things we should know is that California and most blue states, by the way, states that are controlled by Democrats, are net providers of federal revenue to the US government, and that many red states are net recipients of federal resources. And so what that means is we pay more in federal tax in its different iterations as Californians than we receive in services or investment from the federal government. And one of the ways in which the Trump tax cut in 2018 exacerbated that problem was by putting a cap on what they call the SALT, the state and local tax, which is an issue that's going to come up in this debate over the next several days, because typically those same blue states have uh, pay higher state and local taxes. In other words, these are states that are prepared to invest in their own infrastructure, in the protection of their environment, and in their long-term economic development by more heavily investing in education and other human development programs than red states. So the high cost of living that we experience in the state of California right now is in part because of the success the state of California has had in attracting high wage jobs and high wage labor, much of which is indigenously produced or domestically produced by Californians.
So it seems like they would do something wise, like you know how when you have a problem with your landlord, you go file a suit and then you withhold your money, but you put it in an escrow account. And it seems like with all the blue states or a majority of them will pull together and literally lodge the suit because it's still so damaging to the people that they're not considering. And we've got to make up the difference some kind of way. It's more like responsibility as opposed to dodging taxes. That's
That's
just the thought. We could talk about this for a long
yeah,
time.
that's a very creative approach. I
Yeah.
think one of the reasons why I'm attracted to the Empowerment Congress is that people like you come with solutions that are out of the box and worthy of consideration, whether we pursue them or not. It speaks to the creativity of um, the solution-oriented approaches that people in forums like this are prepared to take and to argue, to develop, to devise. And that's what we need. I'll give you another example. This, these cuts to Medicaid are going to have a significant impact on nursing homes, on long-term care, on the provision of healthcare more generally. So it may just mean that it will spawn another discussion about what is the most efficient and effective way to provide health care for all. And so we need to be prepared to engage a conversation about single payer, whether we agree with it or not. But one does have to ask the question, well, all one really needs to do, and I'll challenge any of you to do it, even while we're on the call. Go to your Google, do an internet search, put in United Healthcare share price. And when it comes up, you'll see a graph. And if you hit the little maximum button, you'll see the share price as it's developed over the last 25 or 30 years. And you'll notice that around 2010, the share prices of United Healthcare stock skyrocketed. What happened in 2010? The Affordable Care Act, which was really the Republican plan for healthcare coverage that was advanced when Bill Clinton and Hillary Clinton were arguing for healthcare reform in the 1990s. look up Aetna healthcare healthcare plan and see what happened to its share prices, or any of the other major insurers, and look at what happened to their share prices around the year 2010. And so all of that reflects profit and value as a result of the federal subsidies that health insurers receive under the Affordable Care Act. Actually, taxpayers receive the subsidies, but they're paying the subsidy to the health insurance company. Huge profit because the uh, the the plan that got implemented was effectively the Republican plan for providing universal health care coverage. And we all should know by now that typically their approach is to ensure optimal profitability of big companies.
So
So
how
I,
would they do that to continue doing that in the hospitals? Because there's already talk now of how much the hospitals are going to be um, lacking from having people cut off of the Medicare system,
I
and
think
how they're going to pick up the brunt of it and then still manage to be solvent.
the ones that will be insolvent, the ones that become insolvent will go out of business, or they will be bought by for-profit um,
No, wait, I wanna hope.
healthcare systems that will be placing market share and profit over healthcare decisions.
Hmm. Okay, thanks.
That's what, in my opinion, will happen.
So on the, because you're talking about Medicare, a little breath of fresh air today that Trump is gonna have to go back and revisit his tax agenda because of the restructuring of Medicare and Medicaid, where he even have Republicans not they're going against that bill, especially Republicans are in these swing states. So
Mhm.
with that in mind, it punishes the poor and how those Republicans can go back and tell their community that they're cutting out Medicare. Trump's got to go and redo that whole tax agenda.
Well, we hope he does. But remember, much of this same conversation happened in 2018. The, in fact, what was Trump's signature legislative accomplishment in Trump 1.0? It was the 2018 jobs and tax cut legislation. And so that is something for us to ponder. And it worked for him. He won in 2024 on an even more aggressive approach, even though it added to the debt. So we can't we have to we can't rely on people understanding necessarily their own interests immediately. What we need to do is make sure that people are actively involved in defense of what they perceive as their interest, as a way of reinforcing their understanding of the broader political landscape. That's why when we get out there uh, a week from this Thursday at the Social Security office, we will have material that explains the difference between Medicaid and Medicare. And pursuant to a comment in the chat, we'll need to find out what the difference is between Medicare, traditional Medicare, and Medicare Advantage programs, which is what uh, uh, the Trump administration is proposing. One of the reasons they're proposing Medicare Advantage programs is because if you get sick on a long-term basis and have a very serious chronic disease, Medicare Advantage programs are not necessarily the health insurance coverage that you would want. So uh, that's because there, as I understand it, are typically higher copays and so forth associated with it. And if you're in the hospital and you have to pay the copays associated with hospitalization over a week's period of time or a couple of weeks and so forth, you can find yourself in desperate financial straits. Now, I cannot pretend to be a complete, you know, savant when it comes to healthcare coverage. Questions that are posed are questions that we can look up ourselves using the tools that are available to us. And we will endeavor to try to bring people with expertise into this forum to discuss these things over the next period, however long that may be. And so these questions are important. I guess the question is Meals on Wheels being cut? My understanding is yes. Meals on Wheels is being significantly reduced. So there's an array of services that previously existed and were supported by the federal government through the states that are on the chopping block. Some of them, it may be appropriate. Some of them may have to go because, quote, we can't afford it. We could afford it if we were willing to make sure that everybody who pays taxes pays their fair share in a country as wealthy as this. That's just my opinion. The issue is trying to get that 50% plus one of voters to see it the way we do. And so it goes back to what Sister Annette was posing. How do we do what we do? What do we do? Part of it is just talking, first of all, to our family members. I think I've shared before that I try to write a letter a week to my congressional delegation on a topic of interest to me and share that in my family chat group so that they know what Vincent is working on today. And I try to write it in a way that provides them with information that can quote a source that they can go look up on their own. So that's that adage about fishing. Give a person a fish and they'll eat for a day. Teach a person to fish and they'll eat for life. So we have to be our own educator agitators, and in the process become movement engineers, figuring out how to engineer a movement where all of our voices can be raised, hopefully collectively, in one direction, which aims to minimize disparity, produce equity, and support common sense public policy making. Now, we promised to get you guys off the call by 7:30. It's 7:38. I put into the chat two sources of information. Um, I'll do it again. If I can find it. One is I think, the Committee for a Responsible Federal Budget. I do so with fully understanding that this is a Republican leaning group. And in the Empowerment Congress, we are nonpartisan, but we do have interests to protect. And the party that is willing or able or seeking to advance our interests on a case-by-case basis deserves our support, in my opinion. Are there any other questions? I indicated in the chat as well that I will figure out how to get this PowerPoint to you. I don't think I can, the chat will not permit me to put a PDF in it. So I'll figure out another way to get that PowerPoint to you. And I'll try to make a note about the three sources of information: the Taxpayer Foundation, which is another Republican leaning group, and the Committee for a Responsible Federal Budget, and the Center for Budget Policy and Priorities. The three sources that I used for the PowerPoint presentation this evening. I would encourage each of you to go to those PowerPoints, those resources. In fact, before I get off the call, let me show the shoot, where is it? This is the Center on Budget and Policy Priorities. And a number of these charts will look familiar to you, because all I did was take screenshots of them and then drop them into a PowerPoint presentation. These policy briefs, by the numbers, give a great deal of detail, far more than I was able to provide, but enough in the way of information that you can look up the materials yourself. This data sheet, by the numbers, state by state data, fact sheets, and resources, is particularly useful. Note the date that it was updated just a few days ago, and look at some of the source material. Legislative district data for people with disabilities in SNAP. impact of cutting expansion match rates for states that provide state-only funded health coverage to people who are undocumented. Impact of SNAP cost shifts to states in the House Agricultural Reconciliation Bill. People at risk of having Medicaid coverage taken away by the work requirements. And oh, look at this, legislative district data for seniors in SNAP. Trends in WIC coverage. Legislative district data for people of color in SNAP. Legislative district data for veterans and SNAP. So the internet is chock full of data that's available to us by asking the right questions and taking a few moments to browse the information that is presented. And if it comes from a reliable source or a source that we think is reliable, I always go to a website like this and click on the About. So who are these guys? How are they funded? Who's the staff? Who's on the board? Do they appear to be credible? Right? So here's a professor emeritus at the School of Public Policy, the dean of Georgetown Public Policy School, professor emeritus from Rutgers, somebody from the Urban Institute, and oftentimes these board members will have links to their Vitas, so you can look at what they've been doing. Let's see how this organization is financed. That's important, right? All of that's good. Who we are, what we do, what is their history. In the state of California, there is a counterpart for the same organization. And so you can find California specific stuff that is reflective of this kind of analytical work on policy matters specific to the state of California. All right, you guys.
Had one question.
Yes, ma'am.
On the time frame, it says like the oldest or the most recent date was 2023. So that means that's the most current statistics that they're working with, and they just go through and update those according to what's going on, with using that base of people that they have in there.
I don't know for sure, but that is a reasonable guess. Yeah.
Okay, thanks.
Or that's the data that they have most recently. For example, I look up regularly how much has been collected in tariff revenue since Liberation Day in April. And that data, those data are not available yet because they apparently don't report it except on a quarterly basis. So it's sometimes difficult to get real-time data about what's going on. But If it's within the last year or so, it generally is pretty good depending on what it is you're tracking.
Yeah, it was like a year and a half, so 2000, okay, thanks.
Mhm. Okay, guys. Any other questions? I again apologize for not having a meeting, not being able to start the meeting on time fully. We'll try to do better the next time. Good night.